Okay, well, hi everybody. Thanks for coming along, for making the time. So in this presentation, we're going to be looking at doing fully automated deployments using these two products, Octopus Deploy and TeamCity. So a bit of an agenda. So we'll start off by looking at the theory behind automating deployments with the two products, talk a bit about their strengths and the things they do well and how they can work together. And then we'll have a look at a few demos. So we'll look at creating packages of our .NET applications that we can deploy using Octopus. We'll look at the process of deploying them, and then we'll look at triggering those deployments out of TeamCity. So most people, I think, are familiar with TeamCity. It's a continuous integration and build server from JetBrains, and it really excels at doing the kinds of things a CI server should do, such as taking code out of version control systems, and it has a wide range of support for different version control systems, building that code, running tests, gathering code coverage metrics, and producing artifacts that we might want to deploy later. Octopus Deploy kicks in where TeamCity leaves off. So what Octopus Deploy excels at is taking those artifacts that you've built, so the binaries, the asset files, and so on, and then pushing them up to your production servers, so web servers, application servers, database servers, configuring them locally, so making changes to IIS, setting up Windows services, running database scripts, and so on, and doing all of that in a way that allows you to easily model your deployment scenarios. So these packages need to go to this set of machines, these packages go to these machines, these configuration settings need to change between environments, and so on, as well as giving you a bit of a dashboard where people in your organization can jump on and have a look and see which versions of your application are in which environment at a given time. So in any automated deployment solution, there's a few key concepts or components that we need to make an automated deployment work. Initially, we're going to need a version control system, so developers are checking their code in, and we need a central place to store that. We have a build process where we take code from that version control system, and we're using that to produce artifacts, so binaries, package files, and so on, that we can then deploy. And then the final stage is to deploy them and then to promote them to different environments. So ideally, and the reason why we split these two up, is if we've deployed something to test or to staging, we don't want to go all the way back to a source control system, recompile everything, perhaps get slightly different versions of libraries because things have been patched and so on, and then to be deploying something slightly different into production. So by splitting these two stages, we can reuse the assets we've created, the artifacts, and then deploy them into different environments. Now that item in the middle, the artifact repository, that's a term that comes from a book, Continuous Delivery. In ITIL, it's referred to as a definitive software library or media library. And there's a lot of different examples. So it might be a file share, it might be a third-party product like Nexus or Artifactory, or it could even be TeamCity. So if you've done builds in TeamCity, you might have noticed that there's an artifacts tab where TeamCity can take things that you've produced during a build and make them available for use later. But the key concept of this is that it's a single place where we can go and we've got all of the different release candidates that we've built so that we can redeploy them at a later stage. So if we're ever asked, can you redeploy that build that we had 3 months ago, we've got a single well-known place to get that artifact from. To handle artifacts, Octopus uses the NuGet package file format, which is an open source file format from Microsoft. It's based on the OpenXML document specifications, so it's basically a zip file containing all the files you want to deploy, plus a manifest that describes what's in it. So on screen here you can see a UI for looking at NuGet packages, and on the right we've got some content. And on the left, we've got this metadata. So every package has an ID as well as a version number, which allows us to know which version of the package we're actually looking at. If you're from a Ruby world, this is the equivalent of Ruby gems for Node.js. It's a Node Package Manager, Maven for Java, and so on. It's the same concept, but in the Microsoft .NET world. The reason Octopus standardizes on this is that NuGet has great support within the Microsoft ecosystem, including from TeamCity. So if you haven't tried it, TeamCity can be enabled as a NuGet server, and any NuGet packages you create in your build are automatically available for use through that NuGet repository. So looking at how TeamCity and Octopus can work together, as we mentioned, TeamCity excels at taking code out of a wide range of different version control systems, building it, testing it, doing all of those things that we need to do to make sure that we've got a high quality package that we can deploy later. And TeamCity can make that available through its internal NuGet repository. Octopus is then going to take over the role of taking the packages out of that repository, pushing them to the different environments, promoting them, and configuring them for each environment. So the first demo we'll look at is how do we create a package, a NuGet package in TeamCity that we can then deploy with Octopus. So jumping to Visual Studio, I've got a solution open here which is just a sample. It has an ASP.NET MVC project and a Windows Service project. And it looks like a standard set of Visual Studio projects. The only difference is I've added a couple of PowerShell files, deploy.ps1 and post-deploy.ps1. And if those files are included in a package, when Octopus installs it on a target machine, it will run that package, and so we can use that for doing things like setting up IIS websites, registering Windows services, and so on. And we don't have to mess around with configuring PowerShell remoting or have any concerns about being on a domain, that kind of thing. So Octopus can take care of that. So I've created this solution. I've got it building. So if I jump over to my TeamCity server, you can see I've got a simple build configuration which just builds the code, runs unit tests, and will soon produce a package. If I look at the artifact section, you can see currently there's no artifacts, so that's the thing that we're going to try and fix up. So I'll start off, I'm going to go into this build. You can see the build was successful previously, so far we're just compiling it. If I go to build steps, we've got two steps. So one is calling MS build, and the other is running NUnit. I've also got a build trigger, so that when I check changes into source control, TeamCity is going to pick up those changes and do the build. I've also set up two build parameters. So one is the build configuration. So this value will be passed to MS build as an MS build property. So for those familiar with Visual Studio, when you do a build, you can choose debug or release, and this is just going to pass in that setting. And because my project uses some NuGet packages as libraries, TeamCity will automatically go and fetch those NuGet packages to save me checking them into source control. But to allow that to work, there's an environment variable I set within TeamCity that tells NuGet that it's safe to go and do that, because out of the box it won't. So what I'm going to do is add a couple more build parameters here. The first one will be called run Octopack, and that's going to be a system parameter to allow it to be passed through to MS build, and it'll have a default value of true. I'll also go and edit this. So if you're not familiar with these parameters in TeamCity, by default these values will be used, and that'll be passed to MS build. But when users run a build custom, for example, not from a trigger but they manually click run, this information can appear in a dialog and just make it a bit more friendly to them. So I'll call this create package, and I'm going to make it a checkbox, and if it's unchecked the value will be false, and save that. So this run Octopack property will be passed into MS build, and we're going to install a little MS build set of targets in our sample project, which is going to allow Octopus to automatically create these NuGet packages. So that's the first the parameter I'll set, and the second one will be called Octopack package version. Again, a system property, and here what I'm going to do is use one of the predefined TeamCity build parameters, and I'm going to take the current build number. So on a previous screen I had that configured to be 1.0 and then an incrementing number, and that's what I want my NuGet package versions to be as well. And I'll just give that a friendly name, package version, and make it a text box. So saving that, if I jump back to my tab and go to the run dialog and build parameters, I get a bit of a nicer experience editing these. Now that alone won't be enough to produce the package. I'll have to go to Visual Studio, and I'm going to install a package called Octopack within my project. So selecting my web project here, I'll run that. That'll go to the NuGet repository, download the package and install it. And all it's doing is it's adding a custom set of MS Build targets, which if that run Octopack parameter is passed in, will automatically go and produce a NuGet package containing the files needed to deploy this application. And we'll do the same for the Windows Service project. So selecting that here, installing Octopack. So that's done. We'll just make sure everything is saved. And then the source code for this is on GitHub, so you'll be able to download the source code for the sample and have a look at it. All I'm going to do is add the files that have been added, commit them to my Git repository, and then push those changes up to GitHub. Oh, I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to jump into the UI because I think this is a new branch that I obviously haven't pushed. So I'm going to just run that. And jumping back over to TeamCity, by the time this commit finishes, okay, and then within about 60 seconds, TeamCity should pick that up. It'll do a build, and we should get some artifacts. So, Paul, I'm not sure if there's been any questions yet, but this is probably a good time to take them if anyone has any questions.
No, I think we're good to go so far, Paul.
Okay. We can see here that TeamCity's detected that change. It'll shortly build that code and run the test, and we should hopefully get some artifacts as part of that build. While that's running, I'll just show you some other things I've done in this sample project. So over in the sample, we have a web configuration file, and we have a custom application setting here called site environment, which is just a value which I'm going to be displaying in the UI when this application is deployed. And this value is just going to show the current environment that we deployed to, and I'm going to dynamically change that when we deploy it to the different environments we'll be looking at in a later step. So site environment application setting. Okay, so this build is almost completed, and you can see some artifacts have now appeared within TeamCity. So if I download this package, you can see we've got the two packages created, and the version number for each package is 1.02, which also matches up to the build in TeamCity. I'll open this using the NuGet Package Explorer UI. So you can see this manifest information has come through. It's my web project 1.02. And if we look at the files included in the package, it's got the binaries that were built, it's got the views, but it doesn't have any C# files or any other files that we wouldn't want to deploy as part of this build. So just the files necessary for deployment. And the same if we look at the Windows service. So we've got our deployment script, our executable, but none of the C# or other files. So that was produced by Octopack. So that build's complete. Before we go on, so there's one other setting that I've done within TeamCity. So if I go to the Administration tab, there's a set of a NuGet Settings tab. And what I've done is enabled the inbuilt TeamCity NuGet server. So that's available here. And if I take this link and put /packages on the end, we can see that both of those packages have now shown up within this feed. So NuGet feeds are Atom feeds, and that's just happened to show up in my RSS UI. But just to show that those packages have been built and they're available within that inbuilt NuGet server. So far we've looked at taking the code from version control, in this case our GitHub repository, we've built it, we've tested it, and we've produced those packages, and they're available within the TeamCity NuGet repository. We haven't looked at the deployment side of things yet. So for this next demo, what we're going to do is take the package we've built with TeamCity, and we're going to push that to a number of different machines in different environments. Now, one of the problems we can face with doing automated deployments is from a security side. So we've got to take these artifacts we've built, the packages, as well as configuration files, potentially connection strings, other things that we might want to keep secret. And we've got to push them to a myriad of different places. So depending on your environments, that might mean an Amazon EC2 instance, a Windows Azure VM role, or data centers that are local, or perhaps over a VPN connection. And those machines are possibly not on the same Active Directory domain, so there might be, you might have kind of a segmented setup where you don't have easy access from your Octopus server to use your Active Directory credentials to be able to push those packages through. So the way we approach this problem in Octopus is we have an agent service that runs on all the machines you plan to deploy to, and it listens on a port, in this case port 10933, and our Octopus server connects and pushes packages out to those tentacles. So instead of having all those machines connecting back into the server and polling it, we just make an outbound connection to the machine we plan to deploy things to. Now in doing this, there's two critical security questions that both sides of this equation are going to be thinking about. The Octopus server is about to push up a package that has your code on it, it's got configuration files, potentially connection strings, and it's going to be pushing those to a machine. And it wants to make sure that that machine is the machine it expects and that someone hasn't just done a man-in-the-middle attack and is intercepting your packages. And likewise, the tentacle, which we call our agent, the idea being an octopus controls many tentacles, this agent is going to be receiving a package and it's going to be installing it, running a whole bunch of scripts that have a pretty high level of permissions to run. It wants to make sure it's getting them from a trusted source. So the way we approach it in Octopus is using public key cryptography. So when you install your Octopus server, we generate an X509 certificate with a private key and a public key, and we do the same when you install the agent service. And as an administrator, when you set these up, you exchange just the private keys to set up a two-way trust relationship. The idea of this is that the Octopus will only trust commands that it gets, or the tentacle will only trust commands from an Octopus that it trusts, and the tentacle will only accept commands from an Octopus that it trusts. You don't have to exchange passwords. All we're exchanging is the thumbprints of the public keys of the certificates, and we don't have any active domain credential requirements or being on the same domain. And if you've used SSH connecting to Amazon EC2 instances, for example, or connecting to a Git repository, it's basically the same process of this two-way trust relationship. So now let's look at using Octopus Deploy to take those packages we built earlier and deploy them. So jumping to the Octopus Deploy dashboard, so Octopus provides a web interface which you use to do your deployments. And our dashboard is oriented a little bit differently to TeamCity. On the horizontal axis we have projects, and on the vertical axis we have projects, and then running horizontally we have environments that you deploy to. So people will be able to see which version of an application is deployed on which environment. If I go to my Environments tab, I've registered a number of machines in Octopus, so each one with the name of the machine and the port that it listens on. And each machine that you create in Octopus can have one or more roles, and those roles are specific to you and your application. You can create as many as you like, and that's the way that you model which packages need to go to which machines. So in this case, in my test environment, I've only got one machine, and it's both an application server and a web server. My staging environment has two, each of them in a different role, and my production environment has 4 machines with 2 app servers and 2 web servers. If I go to the configuration tab, we also have a NuGet tab, and here I've connected it to that TeamCity server. So packages that are created from TeamCity will be available within my Octopus server. Now I've created an empty project for this sample, and what I'm going to do is specify the deployment steps. So the first one, we provide a number of different steps that you can run, running a PowerShell script, for example, sending an email. And we also have the ability to pause a deployment while it's running, either at the start, the end, or partway through a deployment for a human to get involved. So that might be, I deploy a package here, and now I wait for someone to come and manually verify that it works before I deploy it over here. Or it might be that we wait to get approval from marketing before we continue with the deployment. So anything that requires a human to get involved, Octopus can cater for that. But in this case, we're just going to deploy a NuGet package. So I'll type in the name of the package. It's going to go and query packages that match that. So I'll start off by deploying the web package, and then we choose which roles are going to receive that package. So in this case, a web server. All web servers will receive the package.
Hi Paul, one of the guys just asked on the questions, do NuGet and Octopus work in a Java on Linux environment, or are they Microsoft only?
At this stage they're Microsoft only. We are looking at, for version 2, having the Tentacle agents run on Linux environments through Mono. The difference being, instead of running PowerShell scripts, we'll run Bash scripts, but all the same you'll still be able to use NuGet packages. NuGet does run through Mono on Linux, but the Octopus server is Windows only, and currently the Tentacles are Windows only too. So the next step, so I'm going to take my Windows Service project and deploy that to my app server roles. So hitting add. The other thing we can configure as part of an Octopus project is variables. So typically things like connection strings and other settings are going to change depending on the environment that we're in. So Octopus allows you to create these variables with names and values and apply them to a specific scope. So you can see I've got a few defined. For example, my website is going to get different IIS web bindings, so all listening on port 80 but with a different host name, depending on the environment that it is in. Likewise, that site environment application setting that I had, I've defined that here, and I'm actually referencing an inbuilt Octopus variable called the environment name, so I can apply that to all, but it's going to substitute to put in the name of the environment here. So that's this concept of variables. So going back to the home page, I'm now going to create a release, and for now I'm just going to do a manual deployment. So a release in Octopus is made up of all of the different packages and the version of each package that you plan to deploy, and that whole thing is snapshotted and turned into a release. So my 1.0 release is going to be made up of these two packages and selecting these versions, which we get from our TeamCity NuGet server. You can also add release notes. So we'll create that release, and it's going to go off and get the information about these packages. And this page then gives you a single place where you can look at a release and the packages and the versions that were selected, as well as the different environments it's been deployed to. So we haven't deployed this yet. We'll now go to deploy. And so this is where we're going to take a release and apply it to an environment. So we'll choose the environment we want to deploy to, in this case my test environment, and I can deploy that.
Paul, while that's deploying, someone has asked, do you need to run an individual NuGet package per site or service, or can you have all your sites and services in a single NuPack?
Yeah, you could. So you could have one package that contains a number of different websites, a number of different Windows services. The two issues you might have with that are from a versioning point of view. So you might want to update just one of your websites at once without potentially redeploying all of the websites. So typically you'd segment the packages based on that kind of versioning requirement. But you definitely could have one package. Octopack just makes it easy to create those packages. So NuGet has a command line that you can call during a build, but you've got to make sure that your files, for example, that you're excluding the C# files and so on. So Octopack just does a lot of that by convention to create a solution that just works most of the time. And obviously, if you've got a very advanced scenario, you could create NuGet packages manually. They are just zip files with manifests, so that, and there's a lot of tools that can create them.
And a follow-up question off the back of that. Why not only run NuGet pack rather than use an Octopack?
Yep, so you could run NuGet pack. The issue would be that when you run NuGet pack on a project, by default you will include files that you probably don't want to include in your package, like your C# files. So Octopack is effectively just calling NuGet pack, but it goes through and selectively chooses which files to do. But prior to Octopack, everyone just called NuGet pack manually, and some people still do, and for some complicated builds, that would still be the path to go down. But in the general case, Octopack just makes it a little bit easier. So this deployment has run. We've deployed the test successfully. You can see the deployment went through a number of stages. So first we go to the TeamCity server, we download all of the packages, we work out which machines are going to receive those packages, and we push them up. And we do that before we start installing any packages, even when we have multiple packages to run. And that way, if the upload fails, we haven't gotten halfway through a deployment only to find we couldn't upload one of the packages at the end. Once everything's uploaded, we then go through the installation phase. So if I go down here, you see that these steps get run sequentially. So we did the web step first because we specified that first. We work out which machines will receive the package, and then we can see the log that came from that machine as it ran the package. So here it called my deploy.ps1 PowerShell script. We got the output from that PowerShell script. And going up, we can see that it also made a change to one of the app settings. So we found the site environment app setting, and we went and changed that value. So by default, Octopus will look for those config files, open them up, and try and fix up any app settings you've got. But obviously, if you had something more complicated, you can run PowerShell script or XML config transforms. Okay, so with that deployment complete, we can then take that deployment and promote it and put it in a different environment. So now I'll push it up to staging and hit deploy. And while that runs, I'll go back to the dashboard, and you'll be able to see the dashboard is starting to fill out. So we'll have a project which has a test environment, and it will have version 1, and we're currently deploying version 1 to staging. So you can imagine having a large monitor in your office that has this dashboard showing, and you'll be able to see which versions are deployed to which environments, how long ago your UAT environment was deployed to, and so on. We click through to this.
Paul, what type of artifact pattern are you using inside TeamCity? Is it an artifact dependency or is it a snapshot dependency?
For now, there aren't any dependencies because we've only got the one build configuration. If we go to the settings, so typically you would use these paths to specify which packages to pick up from a build to make available as artifacts. The Octopack package, when it runs, if we look at the build output here, it actually uses TeamCity service messages to tell it that we've produced a package. So you can see here, I've got an artifact that I've produced, and here's my NuGet file. And that just saves you wiring up that artifact setting. If Octopack is enabled, then it will automatically become an artifact without having to set that up. In our next step, we'll look at using snapshot and artifact dependencies to then take those and automatically deploy with Octopus. Okay, so my deployment to staging is finished. So we've taken our code, we've built it, we've tested it, we've made it available in NuGet, and then we're deploying that and we've promoted it using Octopus. But so far we've done that manually. So the experience is we're checking code, TeamCity builds it, then we go to Octopus and we manually deploy it to an environment. We can streamline that by having TeamCity automatically tell Octopus to deploy, to create a release and deploy that release to an environment. So that's what we'll do now. So I'm going to go into my project in TeamCity, and I'm going to create a new build configuration. And I'm going to call this deploy to test. We'll skip ahead here. Now this, all of this is going to do is call Octopus and tell it to create a release. So we don't actually have to connect it to a version control system. And for the build runner type, we've created a custom plugin for TeamCity that allows you to call these Octopus, to call an Octopus API to create releases and do deployments. So I'm going to choose the Octopus Deploy Release runner type. And I'll set a bunch of settings to connect it to my Octopus server. So the URL for my Octopus server, if I go over here, I'm going to go to my profile page in Octopus. So obviously we have users can log in using Windows credentials or Forms authentication, depending on your environment. And every user gets an API key that they can use. So we'll take that API key and we'll put it in here. We'll choose the project that we want to deploy, which is this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, for the release that I create, I'm going to use my build number from TeamCity. And I'm going to set that build number to be the same as the build that produced the packages. So we'll go back and do that in a minute. Now, these settings will create a release. We can also then deploy that release to an environment. So I'm going to choose test. And if we check this box, Octopus, or the target, the build runner, sorry, will do the deployment and it'll wait for it to complete successfully before the build finishes. So that way you'll get an error in TeamCity if there's some kind of problem deploying that package. So I'll save that. I'm now going to go to build triggers, and I'll set up a trigger for when a build finishes, so that way when my project is being compiled and some artifacts are available, this build will automatically run. And I'll make it only for successful builds. And I'm also going to set up a snapshot dependency. So the idea of these, it's not so important right now, but it will be later. But the idea is that when you've got multiple builds running, you want to tie them to a snapshot of the same set of source code. So you don't want a build that's run a little bit later to pick up a slightly different version of the code. So in this case, we're going to tell it to use the same snapshot as this build. And we'll save that. So if I go back to the settings for this build now, I'm going to change the build, and instead of using an auto-incrementing value, I'm going to take the version number from the snapshot dependency that I've added. So saving that, going back to projects. So what I'll do now is I'll just kick off a build manually, and when this build finishes, this build will run, and it will use the version number from this build as the version number for this build because of that snapshot dependency. And then it's going to call Octopus and tell it to create a release using that version number.
Paul, just while that's running, there's a few questions in that are quite good questions. Can Octopus handle load balance deployments? So can it tell the load balancer to take apps out of service?
Yep, assuming that your load balancer can be automated, so assuming there's an API that you can call or something you can call from a PowerShell script, your deployment would look something like take my web package and deploy it to a set of machines. So you might have in your environment page, you'd have all of your machines perhaps given, red, blue, something like that, so that you can segment them. So you would deploy them all to the first set of servers. Then you would have a PowerShell step that connects to your load balancer, removes those machines, and adds the new ones. And then you would have another step, which is to deploy it to the remaining set of machines.
Okay. The next question is, are web config transforms supported by Octopus?
They are. So if you've got a config transform called web.release.config or an application, for example, if you're deploying a Windows service, if it ends with .release.config, we'll always run it as an XML transform. And also if you have a transform file that's named after your environment, so here I'm deploying to test, my environment name test, so if you've got test.config, we'll also run that, so you can have environment-specific transforms as well as a general release transform that will run. So while that's running, I'll go back to the Octopus dashboard. And we can see this 1.03 release is now being deployed to my test environment. You can also go and have a look at the output for this build. It should finish shortly. So we've got this Octopus Deploy runner that's running. It's just using a REST API to connect to the Octopus server. It's working out what steps are in the release, and then it's going off to the NuGet server and it's working out which package versions are available. And over here you can see that for each of these packages, We've selected 103, and the reason we've selected that is it's the latest version that's available in TeamCity. Now that's pretty good in most situations, but if you've got multiple builds running at once and those builds take a while, then it's possible that we might be trying to deploy a package that's newer than the release that we're deploying. So we'll look at shortly a way of fixing that up to be specific to only deploy the packages that we actually just built. So we create this release and then we deploy it. We wait for the deployment to finish. It has finished, so this build has finished within TeamCity and the deployment's finished over here in Octopus. So we're going to go and modify those settings now, and I'm going to add a new dependency which is going to be an artifact dependency. So here I'm going to take those NuGet packages that I've built in the previous step and I'm going to use those packages as part of my deployment. Now when we create this, we can choose the build that we want to take the artifacts from. In this case, because we're using a snapshot dependency, we don't just want to take the latest build, so TeamCity is helpfully telling us that we should use the build from the same chain option to take the artifacts that came from the build that we're running from at the moment. And then I'm going to set up a basic rule that just says take whatever NuGet packages were produced and put them in a folder called temp. And I'm going to clean that folder each time I run this so that I don't get a build up of old artifacts. So I'll save that. And if I go and edit my build step now, there's a command line parameter I can pass in because this whole runner just wraps a command line tool called octo.exe, and this is going to be packages folder equals temp. So that tells us when we're creating this release and we need to work out which versions of the packages to use, go and have a look in that folder and look for a matching package. Okay, so we'll have a look at that change in a few minutes. So the next thing I'll do is I'm going to go back to this project and I'm going to create a new build configuration, and this will be called promote to staging, where we're going to take that, if that previous build was successful, we're now going to take the deployment and push it into staging. We'll come back to set this build number shortly. Again, we don't need a VCS route. And instead of using the Octopus Deploy release, we're going to use promote, which instead of creating a new release, we'll just take an existing release and deploy it. So I'll enter the Octopus server information again. And we'll make it go to staging this time. And again, we'll wait for that deployment to complete successfully. Now, just like our previous one, we want this to run when it's successful. And in this case, I'm going to have it run as soon as this deployment finishes. Now, a more realistic scenario here might be deploy it to a test environment and then have another build configuration which runs some Selenium web UI tests or some other set of automated tests that's going to make sure that that deployment worked and that the application's working. And then you'd have another build that says, if that was successful, now promote it to the next environment. But here I'm just going to run this straight after my first deployment finishes. So I'll save that. And then for dependencies, I'll just use that snapshot dependency again to make sure that it's running as part of a chain of related builds. Okay, so now when this build runs, everything will be compiled, we'll get a new set of artifacts, we'll put them in our test environment and we'll promote them through to staging. And to see if this application is working, we'll just go to test silver sardine. So this value is coming from those variables that I defined as part of my project, where we told it which IS bindings to use. And there's a PowerShell script in this sample that's just going and modifying IS to register these websites. Okay, so we've got our project, and you can see it's showing test up here. If I go to staging, we'll get a similar thing, but it will say staging. If we look in the source code for this, so we've got our setting here that has the environment name. So this value has been changed as part of the deployment to each environment. And the view for this, actually it's over here. is just grabbing that value from app settings. So that's where that's coming from. So here we've got staging, whereas here we've got test, just to see that is all working. So our build is running, we're now deploying it to a test environment.
Sorry, Paul, someone has just asked, are they able to get the use of those Octopus Deploy agents that you've created, or build steps inside TeamCity? Are they going to be made available?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been working on for the last week or so. The source code to it is on GitHub, and you can go and check it out. So it's github.com/octopusdeploy, and you'll find an Octopus TeamCity repository there. So the source code's available. We've got a couple of small changes to make, just cosmetic, and then we'll make them available for download within the next couple of days. And it's just a TeamCity plugin, so it's a zip file that you'll just drop into your TeamCity server, restart the server, and you'll have those targets, those build runners available. So as part of our deploying to test, you can see it's run through, but the difference in this one is that for each of these packages, we've selected the right package version, and the reason we've selected it now is it says user specified. So in this case, we found it in that temp folder, and we've found that there were these two package versions available, and so that's what we've used. And that way we guarantee that the release that we're creating for 1.04 actually has the 1.04 packages, and if we have many builds running in parallel, they're not going to accidentally pick up the wrong package versions. Okay, that's deployed to staging. There's been some kind of problem, so we'll go and have a look. So I missed a step. So what's happening here is if we go back to our project, well, these are both 1.04. Here we've just got build number 1. And so we've connected to our Octopus server, and we've told it, take release number 1 and deploy it to staging. And the error has come back and said there is no release number 1. So we'll go back to this project, we'll go to the settings, and here instead of just using an incrementing value, we're just going to take the same value from our previous build. That way we get that continuity through this chain of builds for the version number. So we should just be able to run that. So now it's creating.
So Paul, again, while you're waiting on that to run,
yep,
there are some questions about, can you change the version of the site that you want to deploy? So if you don't want to deploy version 1.0.4, can you tell it to deploy a different one?
That's right. So if, for example, you want to pick up the latest package for one of your steps, but an old package for a different step or a fixed package, as part of this, you can specify package equals, so it would be the step name, so it would be something like silversardine.web, and the version number that you want, so you might fix it to be a previous version number. Just like on the create release, when you're manually creating a release, by the way, you can see that that deployment to test of 1.04 as well as to staging has completed. On create release, we could take the latest version of this package but choose an old version of this package, and it works the same way. Are there any other questions at this point?
Okay, the next one is the dreaded, any recommendations on database schema migrations, or does this tool support database schema migrations?
Yeah, that's a big question. So the biggest issue when it comes to database deployments is the way that you keep existing data. So there's tools like Microsoft's database deployment tools, which will perform diffs and then figure out what changes it has to make to a schema. And then there's a migration-based approach where every release we're creating scripts like add a column here, drop a column there, insert some data here, and so on. Now, if you've got an approach based on migrations, you're already halfway there because you've got the scripts that you need to go from one version of your database to another, and that's probably the hardest step. Once you've done that, then the next step is just to figure out how do you automate that. So if you've got something that you can wrap up in a batch file or call from PowerShell, then you can bundle those things up into a NuGet package, and then Octopus can execute that for you on the machine that you want it to run on. So we don't do too much to automate that. As far as Octopus is concerned, it's just another package or another set of PowerShell scripts to run, but you could definitely use those to kick off a migration script. There's tools like ReadyRoll SQL, which you can find, I think, at readyroll.com. I'll see if we can get a link to that. It has Visual Studio, a Visual Studio plugin to make it easy to create SQL migration scripts, as well as to automatically bundle them as Octopus packages, and it runs well on CI servers. But any process that you can turn into something that you can automate, Octopus can then call that from PowerShell and take care of it for you.
Okay, and another very interesting question, Paul, is can Octopus handle an approval workflow? So, example, QA and a manager must approve before pushing to production?
Yep, so we'll do that right now actually. So we've got our project and we've got two steps which are just our NuGet packages. So I'm going to go to Add Step and I'm going to choose Manual Intervention Required. So this is where we're saying before this deployment can continue, I need a human to be involved. And we'll call this Approval and we'll say, are you sure? So here you'd add any notes that you need for your approval, and you can choose a group of users who are going to be asked to approve this. So it typically won't be the same set of people that are doing the deployment. In this case, I've only got one group, so I'll select that. And you can choose which environments it applies to. So obviously, if we're deploying to a development environment or a test environment, we may not need the same approval steps that we need for a production deployment. So I'll hit Add. And I'll just change the order of these so that that's the first step that runs. Okay, kick off a new set of deployments here so that we get a 1.05 release, and then that way that step will be run. In fact, I'll just create one quickly now manually. So 2.0, we use the same set of packages, except the difference is that this one will now include this manual release. One of the things that we do as part of, as you're creating each of these releases, is obviously in 2.0 we've added a new step, which is this approval step, which didn't exist in our previous deployments. And as part of creating a snapshot for each release, because it needs to be reliable and consistent as you promote to environments, we take a snapshot of the steps that are included too, so that you get that consistency. So I'll deploy this now, and I'll deploy it to production. Octopus also supports the ability to set up permissions for who can deploy to which environment, so you can say developers can't deploy to production, for example. So we'll run this. So we'll go through the same set of steps. We'll make sure that the packages are available and on the target machines, but before we actually install them and configure them, this approval will appear. And so that message that I wrote in will appear up here. And then, assuming that I'm the person who gets to approve this, I get to then choose to proceed with the deployment or cancel and fail the deployment here. And I can add notes to explain why I'm doing that. So if I say cancel at this point, then that build's going to fail and it won't go and deploy those packages. But if I hit continue, then it would have continued where I left off. And you can scatter these within your build process, within your deployment process. So you might deploy some packages, then get some approval before deploying a database because someone's got to manually go and check that something's online, for example. You can kind of put them wherever you like, but we do support that ability for a human to get involved in a deployment that's not 100% automated.
Okay, let's take some more questions. Does Octopus support website projects as well as web app projects?
It does. Octopack doesn't. So because Octopack works through MS Build and website projects don't have an MS Build file, we don't have an easy way to figure out what files you've got and to turn them into a NuGet package. But if you take the contents of your website and then call NuGet pack the command line manually, you could then use that to create a package and you could automate that through your build server. And then as soon as it's in a NuGet package, Octopus doesn't really care what kind of project it was. It just knows it's got a file with it's got a zip file with files it's got to deploy, and it'll treat them the same way.
Another question is, using Octopack 2.0, I see it adds a DLL in the Octopack folder. Is there a way to avoid having to check that file into source control?
Yep, so the DLL that you're talking about is a set of MS Build tasks, which are the ones that figure out what files are in the build and they need to be deployed. Unfortunately, it can't be excluded from source control. Now, typically a NuGet package you don't want to put in source control because TeamCity or your build server can go and download them itself, and they can be kind of large. In this case, though, because we're plugging into MS Build, we're providing some extra targets, and this package restore step that runs in NuGet is also based on targets. And if the targets don't exist, you won't be able to download those packages from NuGet if there are some target files missing, and likewise if the tasks files are missing. So it's something we're going to look at to see if there is like some tricky way that we can wait until after to make sure that DLL is available. But so far I don't think there is a way, so that DLL does have to go into source control if you're using the package restore option.
Okay, can Octopack read the check-in comments from Git or any other version control system and add them as NuGet release notes?
So when you use Octopack, there's another MS Build property that you can pass. So the way you would do it from TeamCity is to go to Settings, go to Parameters, and the name of this, it's on the Octopack documentation page on GitHub, but it would be a system parameter, and it's called something like Octopack release notes file. And here you just put in the path to a file that contains your release notes, and then if those are release notes that you've got, for example, you might run a git status or to list what check-ins you had, and I know TeamCity actually creates a file that has a list of the check-ins that were involved, and it provides that as a file. So you can reference that file, and then Octopack will pick it up and include that in the release notes of the package it creates. But so far Octopack isn't aware of the specific version control you're using, so it's sort of up to you to provide that file, but if you can then provide it, we can include it in the package. Okay, that's it for my demos on this, and I think we're getting towards the end. So here we've looked at creating those packages in TeamCity using the Octopack MS Build Targets plugin. We've had TeamCity make sure they're available in their NuGet repository. We've deployed them with Octopus manually, and we've looked at the different ways of triggering those deployments from TeamCity. I'll put this links page up so you can get to any of those. I mentioned the plugin that we were using for TeamCity. It's available on GitHub at the moment in source code only form, and then in the next couple of days we'll make it available as a zip file that you can just install to TeamCity. And the sample code that I was using is available from here as well. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Yeah, we've still got quite a few more, Paul.
Okay.
Can Octopus take artifacts from Artifactory or Nexus or any other third-party artifact system? Or is it NuGet only at the minute?
Yeah, it's NuGet only. I think it's either Nexus or Artifactory does have a NuGet feed. I think it might be Nexus, but I'm not sure on that. But yeah, as long as they can provide a NuGet feed, then we can consume them. It would be wonderful to have adapters to plug into the different repositories, and if people wanted to let me know if there are any popular ones that would be good targets, then we could definitely look at that. But yeah, so far it has to go into a NuGet feed. But any NuGet server, for example, a file system, a file share, for example, we can consume from that as well.
Okay. What about email notifications for your workflows?
Yep. So here we looked at deploying a NuGet package as part of a deployment, as well as that manual intervention step. You can also do an email step. So your process might be send an email to marketing to tell them we're going to do a deployment, then deploy some packages. So that would be the first step that you would add. And so you fill in the to list, you set up your SMTP server settings, and then you can refer to those Octopus variables, like the name of the environment, in the body of the email that you're writing.
Okay. What credentials does the tentacle run under when trying to install Windows services or websites, and can this be specified?
Yep, so when you install the Tentacle agent on your machines, so Tentacle is an MSI that you run. It installs and it runs as a Windows service, and by default that Windows service runs under the local system account. And the reason we do that is just because to save you setting up credentials that are specific to that, it's just easy to run under that account, and the reality is that the things you're deploying are probably going to be modifying services, modifying IIS. It has to run under some kind of high privileges, not necessarily an admin, but it's going to need a lot of privileges to be able to do those things. So local system is kind of the best default choice. But once you've installed that Tentacle agent, you can go to the properties in the services control panel and change that to be a custom user. You've just got to give it permission to listen on that port, and then to be able to do all the things it needs to be able to do, like access the file system, modify IIS, and so on. You'll find it will probably approach admin level credentials, but it's completely up to you to set up that user, give it the permissions it needs, and then change the service to run under that account.
Okay, a very interesting question is, are there any transfer optimizations during deploying binaries to tentacles? So if you're deploying again and most of the files are the same, will Octopus be clever enough to only deploy what has changed?
It would be really nice. Unfortunately, we don't. So when you're deploying, it's obviously a NuGet package that's being pushed up. We split that into chunks and we send it over. That file is a zip file, so it is compressed already, but we don't do any kind of differential. These files have changed, so only upload the ones that haven't changed. It is a really nice idea. It perhaps involves a bit of chatting back and forth between the two servers to work out, what files have you got, perhaps hashing them and working that out. But so far, we don't do it.
Okay. This is just a general one. Is it possible to use NuGet to package Java applications without Visual Studio being involved and thus letting Octopus deploy them?
Yeah, you could. So people use Octopus to deploy classic ASP applications as well as Node applications and even native applications. So as long as you can take the files you need to deploy, the Java files, the jar files, whatever you've got, and then put them into a NuGet package, which is, as I said, just a zip file. So there's a command line tool called NuGet.exe. You would call NuGet.exe pack, give it the Java files you want to package up, anything you need to run your application. And that gives you a NuGet package, and then Octopus can deploy it, and you don't need to use Visual Studio to do that. As long as you can call NuGet.exe from the command line, you'll be able to create those packages and deploy them.
Okay, guys, this is Rob. We've reached our time. I'm not sure, Paul. It's pretty late there for you. I don't know if you have time to take one or two more questions, and then we will try to follow up on the blog post when we publish the webinar recording. Maybe we can respond to some of the questions that we didn't get to, because there are quite a few.
Yeah, sure. Well, I can stick around for probably another 20 minutes or so.
Okay, Paul Stack. I'm not sure. How does it look for you?
Yeah, I've got another 30 minutes. It's okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
So another set of questions, Paul, that's coming through is there a way that you can do scheduled releases or nightly builds on a schedule with Octopus?
Yes, and soon. So in Octopus, we're looking at the ability to do a scheduled release. So hopefully our next release, our 1.4 release in a couple of weeks, will include a feature that allows you to, when you create a deployment, instead of having it run right away, have it run at a specified time, but that'll be a one-off thing. So you'll, as part of a deployment, you'll specify that time. Later on, we're looking at a feature to automatically do those deployments repeatedly on a schedule, so pick up whatever packages are available and deploy it every night. But the easiest way to do that for now would actually be to use TeamCity to have a scheduled build. So where I went to the build triggers settings in the TeamCity build, instead of doing a finished build trigger, you can choose a trigger based on the time. And so you would have TeamCity do that build, and then TeamCity could go and create or deploy that release and have TeamCity coordinate that.
Okay. Does Octopus retention policy work in the Octopus package directory path folder?
Okay, so just for everyone else, so Octopus has this idea of retention policies. So you can imagine after a few years of using the product, you're going to have a lot of releases, a lot of deployments that you've done. You probably don't need to keep things from years ago. So by default, we have a retention policy, which is to keep everything forever. You can add your own retention policy and choose which projects that apply to keep releases and the files for them for so long. Now, the retention policy applies both on the Octopus service, so we delete things from our database, and it also applies on the tentacles. So the folder that the packages get deployed to, I'll just jump over. Hopefully you can see this remote desktop connection. So when you install that tentacle agent service, we give it a UI that you can use to administer it, and you can choose where the packages are getting deployed to. So if I was to open up this folder, you'll see the files that are actually being deployed on the machine. So a different folder for each environment, and then for the package, and then the version. So here are those files that got extracted. And yes, these files will be deleted. So we'll go back and delete these as part of the retention policy.
Okay. Is there any way that you can test the deployment on your local machine before releasing it to the server?
There will be in the next release. So it's a feature that's already built and is working. We just have to bundle it in our 1.4 release. So you can install the Tentacle service on your development machine, or even just extract the binaries and run tentacle.exe and then the NuGet package you want to run and any variables that are available, and Tentacle will install that package locally. And you can also use this, for example, you might use Octopus to push out to most of your environments, but there might be one environment where you just have to give files to an admin on a USB stick and they'll install things. So you can use the tentacle.exe version to do that and just have people run them manually. In answer to that previous question, sorry, just reading that again. So the question was, do the retention policies work? And then there's a special variable. So that folder that we looked at where the packages get deployed to, that's the default. But for a project, there's a special variable you can provide that tells it, actually, for this project, I want to deploy it somewhere else. Now, if you do that, the retention policy doesn't apply, because we're assuming that you're possibly deploying to a folder that you're deploying over and over to again. So we can't just go and delete the things from that because we don't know what's in it. So I hope that clarifies that question.
And then maybe one more. Can you clone or copy a project in Octopus like you can in TeamCity?
No, it's a feature that's highly voted for, and we'll be doing it soon, but currently you can't. You could go into so Octopus uses an embedded database, which is RavenDB, and there's a web UI that you can access from your Octopus server to get in there, and you can just copy the project document and give it a new ID and a new URL, and then you've effectively cloned your project. But we don't have a UI feature to do that yet.
Okay, somebody's just popped in a new question. What's the principal difference between deploy and promote? In theory, deployment to any environment should be the same process. Why have two names?
Yeah, there is no difference. So for the build runners, we use So we have Octopus Deploy Release to create a new release and optionally deploy it to environments. And then we have Octopus Deploy Promote, where we are taking an existing release and deploying it to an environment, but the mechanics of it are exactly the same. We just have different buttons because in different contexts it makes a little bit more sense. I think perhaps we do need to change the names of those TeamCity runners to perhaps it should just be release or new release and deploy. I'd love to, if you've got any suggestions on what to name those, but yeah, there is no difference between promote and deploy. It's really your own workflow that determines if you're promoting or not.
Okay. I think we're just down to the last few questions now, so I don't know if you want to just grab a few or...
Yeah, how about two more? We'll call it a night.
So how about cleaning up the package cache folder on the server?
Yep, we do automatically do that now. So as part of the deployment, I mentioned that the Octopus server is downloading the packages from NuGet and then is pushing them to the agents. And we do that just so that each agent doesn't have to connect to that NuGet server and download the packages itself, because it might be behind a different firewall or so on, so we can do it in a more secure way this way. So when we download those, they go into a folder called the package cache, and I think it's every 3 days we'll go through and we'll delete whatever files aren't being used, and we're getting a bit smarter around doing that now. In the past we didn't, and it just ballooned out, you know, because more deployments you'd get a lot of packages, but we do delete them now.
Okay, and then we'll do one more. Are there any specific build reports that you can get from the dashboard?
What kind of build reports do you mean?
It doesn't give any more context. Maybe he means what sort of reporting can the dashboard give him that he can let other people see?
Oh, yeah. So the dashboard in Octopus really just gives you a breakdown of which projects have which versions in which environment. So it's kind of a snapshot of what the current state of the universe is. If you go into a project, you can also see it at a project level. And if you go to releases, you can see which releases you had and which environments they were deployed to and the times that those happened. We don't have a separate reporting tab. We'd love to have it, so for example to show velocity of how many deployments you're doing, which environments, how long they take and so on, but we don't have that feature currently.
Okay, cool. There are still some more, but I'm sure we'll try and wrap these up in the blog post that follows.
Correct. We'll be publishing, once again, we'll be publishing the webinar recording sometime over the next week. We will take a look at the questions again, and if there's anything that we haven't covered in the webinar, we'll try to cover in a blog post. So I would like to thank Paul Stovell for the great webinar and for joining us. Paul Stack, thank you for helping with the questions. It's been very, very helpful and useful. And to the audience and all the attendees, thank you for joining us, for your time, your attention, and your questions. So thank you, guys.